Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hello, welcome back to Right on Track. I am so excited because joining me today is the incredible Charlotte Young. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi everyone.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. I'm so excited you're here because we're talking all about authenticity. And this is a topic that I am super passionate about. I think being authentic is extremely important. So we're talking all about this today. But before we dive into that, can you share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and your songwriting journey so far?
Yeah, sure, of course. So basically, I am a country singer from the United Kingdom, which might come as a little bit of a surprise to people. I know that it's not as traditional being a country singer from somewhere other than the States. But yeah, I've been writing consistently since I was about 15. I take a lot of inspirations from some really great artists who inspired me to be a songwriter, including people like Carole King and Taylor Swift, of course. And there are so many, you could go on forever. I released my first record last year, which was really exciting. It hit number one in the UK country music charts, which was huge. And yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell. I try and write from my experiences and things that I've witnessed. And yeah, songwriting is definitely a passion of mine.
That's awesome. And I think it's fabulous that you write from your own experiences and things that you've witnessed because I do as well. And it seems like being authentic is something you and I both try to do as much as we possibly can. So, to kick off our conversation, would you love to read a fantastic quote by Whitney Houston?
Of course. So the quote chosen today is, I decided long ago not to live in anyone's shadow. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I did as I believe.
I love this quote, and Whitney is just, oh, she was such an incredible artist and so much wisdom from her. So, what does this quote mean to you?
I think as always, which is very on brand for Whitney, is that it feels extremely honest and vulnerable at the same time. You know, it's sort of realizing that at some point you have to put yourself first. And even if you might take the wrong step or people doubt you, then you have the knowledge that you did what was best for you and what you believe in. And I just think that's really earnest. And I think we're missing that a lot of the time. I feel like not a lot of people potentially follow through, maybe because of fear or what other people are going to say. But yeah, I think it's pretty bold. It's great.
It definitely is bold and great. And I think what she's saying is so important because, like you were saying just now, some people aren't always like this. And especially in the music industry, you can tell right away when somebody is following in someone else's shadow or trying to put on a face and be someone they're not. You can see through that because once you start to grow as an artist or songwriter, you're doing the interviews and the performances and social media. And if there's something that doesn't align, people will notice. And so I think Whitney has great wisdom in that, if you succeed or if you fail, no matter what, you will always know that you did what you believe in and what was true to you. And so you're never wondering about that. You're always true to yourself.
I totally agree with that. I think that's super spot on.
So let's talk a little bit about authenticity in lyrics. So you say you draw on personal experiences and things that you've witnessed. Sometimes this can be super difficult to open up in our lyrics. So how do you feel about being so authentic in your lyrics?
I think authenticity is difficult because it comes into a lot of different things. Like, there's a lot of factors that make something authentic. And my number one rule is a habit that I'm really glad that I have, which is if I'm writing something and it just isn't flowing, it's just not coming, then I just leave it. Like, I don't force it. I don't try too hard to write it because I sort of have this whole theory that the music already exists and I'm simply just a vessel. And if it's supposed to come naturally to me, then it will. And of course, you sometimes have different occasions where you might find it difficult to write something because you may be personally going through something quite difficult. That's a different thing altogether. But I think with authenticity is you wouldn't write something unless it was deliberately from a different perspective. If it wasn't something that you fundamentally understood. So, for example, I wouldn't write songs about drinking if I didn't drink. And I wouldn't write a song about being cheated on if I hadn't been through that because I would find it really difficult to sort of channel that, and it's finding like a level of of empathy if you haven't been through that situation. So for example, there's a song I wrote called On the Loose, which was sort of like a tongue-in-cheek song, and I've not experienced being a bit of a femme fatale, but I thought it'd be quite funny to witness it, and I've definitely had friends who you would call a heartbreaker. So yeah, it's just drawing on that, I guess.
That is a fantastic point. And honestly, like as songwriters, we're good at writing, we're good at storytelling. And so if we wanted to, we definitely could make something up. But what you're saying is so important because there has to be a level of empathy. If you haven't experienced something, you shouldn't sing about it or write about it because the people who have experienced it could be like, oh, that's not how that goes. I've been through it and that's not really capturing the emotion the right way. And so it's also a level of respect, like be authentic to, yourself and your story and what you have to share, but don't reach beyond that. Always speak and sing from, a place of truth for you.
For sure.
So for performing, there's also authenticity that comes into this because you want to present yourself in an authentic way when you're standing in front of a live audience performing. And I know you've done a lot of performing. So how have you stayed authentic during these live performances?
I think the first thing is not overestimating what your ability might be. So, for example, like I love to play lead guitar, but I'm not very good at it. So, I wouldn't play it live because that's not me on the record. That's my friend who's like really close friend who's a great guitar player. I try and stick to what I play on the record and how I sort of bring myself out. For example, I'm quite chatty, so I like to talk to the audience quite a bit. So like I'll say something and then I'll just talk at them. I'm not going to try and pretend to be really cool and mysterious by like not saying anything because that's just not me, and I feel like you would see right through that because I'm many things. I wouldn't say I'm particularly like naturally cool. So I wouldn't try and do that. But also I think something as simple as just letting yourself get lost in the song itself. I really love it when artists close their eyes when they sing, and that's something I've always done because I get a bit nervous if truth be told. So I sort of like to block everyone out a little bit and connect with something and then just let it come out naturally, and then I'll warm up and I'll get more used to the audience, and that's when I start talking at them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you brought up naturally, and I think that's really important to highlight here because being authentic means being what's natural to you. And if you're not mysterious or cool, like if you're not an amazing guitar player, it's just like, recognizing that and embracing that this is me. And I think, especially in live performances, it's not like simply a social media post or your song streaming. You're actually standing in front of people. And if you're trying to fake something, like, not only will they see through it, like with your personality, but also you probably won't perform as well because you're trying to act instead of just being you. And I also think that some people can struggle a little bit with being authentic like that and feel like they have to act when they're performing. Just because I think it's like a confidence thing. Like, if you're super shy and you feel like you don't have a quality you believe people expect at performances, it's almost like you have an expectation to do something that you're not. And I think it's just embracing who you are and being authentic instead of trying to put on a performance of your personality. Like, truly show who you are.
For sure, absolutely. I think it's much more. I think people who like my music sort of want to see me be sort of silly and a bit overwhelmed because that's just who I am as a person. Like, I don't have any chill. I'm just constantly like amazed by things. So I think if I came on with this sort of cool bravado and just tried to be somebody I'm not, well, first of all, no one would buy it. And second of all, I sort of I wouldn't like it, like, I wouldn't enjoy it because, I've written these songs in my bedroom on the bedroom floor, and I've I've poured my heart out to the world, and I think the world deserves to hear me do that, considering they've supported me so much. They don't want to see someone that they haven't subscribed for.
I think it's really important because I've definitely experienced the whole thing about being a fan of an artist, especially mainstream. And you see the persona online, you've listened to their interviews, and then something explodes online and they did or said something that was just way out of character, either out of performance or somewhere else. And you just, as a fan, you feel like, oh, I've been supporting this person and listening to their music, and the person who I thought they were isn't who they actually are. And so I think, as an overall kind of point here, if you start to do things out of character and out of personality, those things can pile up. It's almost like getting caught in a lie. Like, you can only act so many times until you do something different. But if you're always yourself over and over and over again, you're not going to have to think about it because who you are is who you are. You're not acting through that.
For sure. Totally agree there.
So let's talk a little bit about social media because that is a place where people do try to present themselves in a different way. But for songwriters, I think it's so important to be authentic on social media because that's where we find a lot of our fans, and that's where we continue to connect with others in the industry, do networking, and all of those things. So what are some of your tips for authenticity on social media, and what are the kind of posts that you like to share with your followers?
Sure. So I think it's important to sort of realize who you're talking to. I mean, if your fan base are a group of teenagers or people who are quite impressionable, then I think it is important to approach the subject I can't say the word sensitively. That's it. I think it's important to approach it sensitively because you can easily sort of show yourself to be this polished person, with all the filters and this, that, and the other, and seem really put together. But that's an awful lot of pressure for someone to look up to. And I think you should definitely be mindful of that. And it's totally okay to show these people who you are because they want to know anyway. So I think try and not force too many of your views down people's throats. For example, like, I think, especially while you're starting out, it's probably not too wise to share a lot of what your major views on different things like religion, etc., are, because you sort of don't want to hurt people, but you also want to make sure that you're sticking to yourself. So if you just post things that are about your music and about your life, then you don't have to approach these upsetting situations, because the unfortunate matter is no matter what your opinion on something is, you're going to upset somebody one way or another. Like, there are very decisive things that happen in the world that people don't really want to hear about. I mean, Dolly Parton very famously doesn't really talk about politics because she says, well, I'm a musician, I'm not a politician. What do my fans want to hear me talk about politics for? There's obviously a time and a place. If something is wrong, then say it's wrong, but it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think, for me, what I like to do, I use Twitter as sort of like just my thoughts for the world. So, like, if I want to eat cake for breakfast, I'll tell you about it on Twitter. But I probably wouldn't post that on Instagram because I feel like nobody really wants to see me eating all the time.
I think you brought up a really great point about holding back on posting opinions on certain things. And I think that's super important because being authentic doesn't mean being 100% transparent about every single thing in your life. And like you said, there is a time and a place for something. And especially as songwriters, we have to find a balance between faking it and being polished and just putting 100% of ourselves online to the point where we hurt people, make people angry, and just come off like super opinionated. And I think that can be a struggle at times, but I know for me personally, I really like to bring my fans into any kind of musical experience I can. I always film studio vlogs when I'm recording. And then when I release new songs, I do behind the lyrics videos for YouTube where I break down the song and show what it's about. And I also run a blog on my website. So I try to find these other avenues of, sharing my story in interesting ways Because you're right, like, as songwriters, they want to see us and what we're really all about, and I think that if we post things online that make us look like, "Oh, everything's perfect and fantastic," and then we release a song that's super deep, it doesn't correlate, and so that's why I think social media is one of the most important places we need to be authentic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, like I said about like large issues, for example, it's knowing when to say something and when not to say something. So, for example, I take the view of if I saw someone being attacked in the street, would I say something? And of course I would, you know? So, if I see someone attacked on social media, then I will probably do the same thing. I would probably act on it and speak up about it because I think, you know, although we don't want to go too deep about how we feel about something sometimes because we want to approach a subject sensitively, we also need to know that this is where our morals are because our fans also want to know that. So, for example, whenever there's major social issues and injustice, I'll happily talk about that, but I will probably keep it to a minimum. But then when it's about me, I don't mind being completely candid and telling them what's happened in my life. So, for example, if I'm feeling a bit sorry for myself because I've got a cold, I don't mind telling them that. If I'm going through something quite hard, I don't mind sharing that online. And I also think it's important to share the importance of being quite brave. Like the other day, for the first time ever, and I've been on social media since I was like 15 and I'm 25. The first time ever, I posted a makeup plus selfie because I thought it would be nice for the world to see it, and to hopefully create a space where people can support other people. So, having doing that, I was actually overwhelmed by the response, and it was just nice to see that. And I think my fans would probably quite appreciate that I was willing to be quite vulnerable there.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And I think that vulnerability can be difficult from a songwriter's point of view. But at the same time, like these listeners and our fans, they come to us and they connect to our music because of what we're saying and what we're putting out into the world. And so I honestly think that it's so important to be authentic online and with all of our fans because the more we show our true selves, and that can be definitely the bad too, like if we're having bad days and all of those things, like sharing that, it just makes us, seem like any other human being. Like just because we're songwriters and artists doesn't mean we're like super powerful and have like super emotions and like are never sad or never have bad days because believe me, we do. So I think it's really important to show that because then it kind of brings our worlds together. It's not just I'm the artist over here and you're the fan, but it's, bringing us together in a way where it's showing humanity and these experiences that everybody goes through. And that just allows our fans to connect with us even more because they can relate to the things that we're going through. It's not only just the music.
Yeah, totally, totally agree with you there. Yeah.
So, another super important thing with authenticity is an artist's brand as a whole. And this can be from, like what you stand for to, the way you present yourself on your website and just as a whole, like your public persona. So, what are some adjectives that you would use to describe your brand and your authenticity with that?
Oh, I really like that question. And I think I'm probably going to give quite a flustered response because I'm never very good at these things. But essentially, I like to think that my brand image is honest and unashamedly so. I mean, I don't mind being quite blunt about my lyrics or anything like that. I think it's better to get the point across. Um, I would like to think that I'm quite open and that there's a space for that and there's a space for everybody because that's what I want to portray. I want to portray inclusivity because there are people from across the world who are in their 60s who love my music and there are people who are from down the street who are 15 and really like my music, and it's nice to sort of have that like massive change in a demographic. But I think also I'm quite fun. I'd like to think so. I mean, I think I'm hilarious. I'm probably not, but I think I'm really so like I have I'm tuning up my guitar on a set, I tell them a terrible joke that no one wants to hear. But like that's I don't know, I don't try and take myself too seriously because I'm not a serious person. I'm not moody, I'm quite cheerful, and I'm passionate, and I'm okay to be that. I think there were so many times when you're younger where people are like, "Oh, you're too sensitive. Oh, you're too loud. You're this, that, and the other." I like to view it as I'm not sensitive, I'm intuitive. And I'm not being loud if there's something serious to be spoken about, because for someone who's not a serious person, it's difficult for me to be serious about something. So I'm happily going to be loud about everything I feel, whether I'm really happy about something or I'm really upset about something. And yeah, I view my it's cliche, I guess, but I view my fans and my listeners as somebody that I could just talk to. And I hope that they feel the same way.
I love that. And I think your super detailed explanation just shows how sure you are of your brand. And that's so important because so many artists I know are totally all over the place, and it's really hard to pinpoint down what do they believe in, like what do they really like. But you're so sure of all of that, and I think that's so important. And also what you said at the end really resonated with me because I don't think as my fans as just, oh, they're my fans. Like, I definitely view them as my friends, really, and I like to talk to them and I like to be super personable. I try to do that as much as possible. You and I share a lot of the same adjectives to describe our brands, which I think is super, super awesome. So, on top of all of this, so we have ways of showing authenticity in all these different areas. And sometimes it can be difficult, even though we know ourselves so well. So, what are some times when you felt like being authentic was being challenged in some way or you found it difficult? Do you have any specific experiences coming to mind?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've definitely had a moment where I've wanted to speak about something publicly, but I can't because it was a complicated reason as to why I couldn't. And I really struggled with that because the situation at hand didn't just surround me, it could potentially surround other people. And I sort of wanted to make people aware of it. But it was a very complicated situation. It's not as black and white as this person did something wrong and I'm angry about it. You have to sort of how are their lives being affected by that? They may have personally wronged me, but it doesn't give me the right to sort of out them like that on social media. I may want to, but I didn't because you try and be the bigger person in a situation. And yeah, I mean, it can definitely be difficult. I think we can all relate to that. And that could be in many different ways. Someone could be treating you like crap in real life, and all you want to do is tell the world about it. But it's probably better to deal with that personally. And if there does need to be a public outcry, then there will be. These things do happen. They're often out of our control.
I think that's awesome that you recognize that and, like, hold back. Even though it is challenging, you're not, spontaneous and reckless about it. Like, you put a lot of thought into it. And I think that's really important because there are some artists who have, like, I'm thinking mainstream, who have totally wrecked their careers for speaking up about something they weren't educated on, or just said something that triggered literally their whole fan base and then they got canceled. Like, that's happened so many times. So it's really great to hear that you're thinking mindfully about all of this.
100%. I think if you are absolutely adamant that you are right on a subject and that what you're saying is true, then the world will prove you right. You don't have to worry about that. Whoever is wronging you or like doing something that isn't right, if they are in the wrong, that will come to fruition. And you shouldn't have to concern yourself with proving them wrong or anything because it's too much energy. And why should you have to jeopardize your career if they're the one who's done something wrong?
Yeah, I know completely. I 100% agree with that. So I'm going to tie this back to Whitney Houston's quote, this next question. So Whitney's talking about, not walking in somebody else's shadow, but doing what you believe in. And this is all tied into being unique in the industry. And in order to be unique and stand out, you have to be yourself. So can you share your thoughts on this? Like, why you think it's in general so important to be authentic so you stand out and you're a unique artist and songwriter?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably quite a cliche answer, to be quite honest with you. But my answer is something along the lines of, I mean, I view almost every artist as if they were a fingerprint. Like, they are completely unique. Like, you're unique, so why would you try and be so and so when there's already someone who exists? You know, like my massive inspirations, if I wanted to, sure, I could emulate them and be that version 2.0, but that's not going to do me any good. I'm not being my true self there. It's not going to do anyone else any favors. You never know. You could be someone's favorite artist. They just don't know it yet. You could be the artist that they're looking for. And yeah, I think it's best to just sort of bare your bones and be yourself, because there's only one of you and no one can replicate you. So you may as well just try and do it yourself.
That's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And I completely agree with that. Like, my favorite country artist is Kelsey Ballerini.
Great choice. I love her.
Ah, same. I love her too. She's great. And like if I really wanted to, I could, dress like Kelsey and do my hair like Kelsey and write my music like Kelsey. Like I could do that if I wanted to, but there's already one Kelsey Ballerini. So, like that's already taken. Like she's already Kelsey Ballerini. So what's the point in trying? And I think like even what Whitney said again, like even if you fail or if you succeed, like being yourself, there's no guarantee that you're going to make it, but I'd rather make it being myself and authentic instead of pretending to be somebody, because if you put on a face and you act and then you blow up and become a mainstream artist, then you have two choices. You can either one, pretend for the rest of your life to be something you're not, or two, completely switch gears and be yourself. But since being yourself didn't get you the fame in the first place, then you're probably going to lose it. So it's always honestly the best option to just be authentic.
I agree. And I think there's another really interesting point to that, is that, I mean, especially as women, we are expected to reinvent ourselves. We are expected to be different every single time. Women are always pitted against each other in the media anyway. So, like, if I tried to be Taylor Swift, then the second I blow up, someone's going to be like, "Oh, well, she's just another Taylor clone. Why do we need her? Blah 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 blah. She's worse than Taylor because of this. Blah blah blah." Like, it really doesn't matter. We don't need to give anyone any excuse to put us down, because the media can do that anyway. But if you are yourself, then sure, you can be compared to people in a sense of, oh, you can hear this in their music, this, that, and the other. They're sort of like, they remind me of this person. That's fine. But that just so happens that that's come out of your personality. You're not trying to mimic that person. And yeah, I think you stand a much better chance with your feet on the ground if you are being yourself, because when the media tries to come for you, then they're coming for you, and you're strong enough in your own character to be like, well, you can't do this to me because of this reason and this reason, and I am unapologetically myself.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just touching on the media briefly before we wrap up, if you're yourself, then you're not like lying and trying to make things up. Like if you say one thing in one interview and it was fake, then in another interview you might say something different. And if people are actively listening, they'll call you out on it. And so, like, the media is like, it's amazing for us independent artists to get us out there, but once you start to get your name out there more, if you screw up or like do something that's inconsistent in any way, the whole world is going to know about it, and literally nobody wants that. No one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation about authenticity. Before we go, Charlotte, can you share one piece of advice to everyone listening about being authentic? Not specifically for songwriting, but no matter what they might be doing in their lives, can you share one general piece of advice about the importance of authenticity?
Yeah, I think the important thing for me in authenticity, and the best advice I can give, is that you were created in one way, right? You are that person, you are created for that reason, and all of your wonderful aspects and all of your flaws come together to create you. And that's enough. That is more than enough for anybody. And if you stick to that, then and you embrace yourself, then you're likely going to have a much better time of it than if you try and be somebody else.
I could not have said it better myself. That is fabulous. Thank you so much, Charlotte. That
Thank
was
you. Thank you.
awesome.
I appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. So before we go, can you share with the listeners where they can find you on social media and listen to your amazing music?
Oh, thank you. Of course. So, if you like what you've heard today, then feel free to check me out on all social platforms at Charlotte Young Music. And if you'd like to check me out on Spotify or Amazon or wherever you listen to your tunes, it's just Charlotte Young. And you can check out my most recent EP, Coffee and Conversations.
Fabulous. Thank you so much again, Charlotte. This has been amazing. Listeners, thank you for listening to this episode about authenticity with Charlotte Young. And of course, until next time,
Stay
stay
right
right
on
on
track.
track.